Welcome and good day, everyone. We, of course, are glad you guys could join us. And you may be wondering why are we wearing these glasses? Well, we have a solar eclipse coming. But of course, it's kind of funny and redundant because we are inside. So why are we even wearing these? But anyway, welcome back to Talk It Over. I know it's been a couple weeks since we've been here dealing with some flu, some illness with my family at the moment. Everybody's been kind of up and down. So it's just been a bit chaotic and crazy, but we're managing through it and everybody's seeming to get on the mend, which is good. So continuing in He Promises, this series, it's been really good. I know there's a few more weeks yet to go, which should be excellent. The first couple have been great. So really looking forward to kind of what Craig's got coming up. But before we dive into this week's, how's your week's been? How have things been going?
Good. Yeah. Had a birthday week and it was so nice to feel like so loved and just seeing people do special things and remember pieces of things that I like, whether that's food or like the gifts. And I just felt really loved and celebrated. So it was a really good week.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Yes. So painting continues in the Slomka household. So the walls are done. Now we're on to doors, and we had our color contest this weekend. Is it going to be urban bronze or Trafalgar black? And we went with the black, and we're going to make it happen. So it's a lot of work. I'm glad I only paint my house every 20 years because it's quite the undertaking.
Yes.
And just deciding what you like and don't like and what you've lived with and why have we lived with that. So Dave's decided he's going to take on some painting of some shutters on some doors.
Oh, man.
May the force be with him because I do not want to do that. So we'll see how that turns out.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think I want to do that either. That's good. That's good. That's great. Yeah.
I think you'd be buying the tool.
I would be buying a spray gun or something. Yeah. Yeah, I would figure out some way to do it. But yeah, it's always great. Birthdays are a lot of fun. Celebrating, taking some time just to enjoy the lead up to the day and after. It's always nice to have those moments where you can kind of just enjoy that moment and then kind of reflect as well on like the year past and the year coming and what is that going to be, what the anticipation of what the new year is going to be as you start that next journey, which is always great.
Yes.
For me it was doctor week, appointments in Toronto, meeting new specialist, and just working on that relationship, somebody new to Emmett's case. So just kind of going over everything with them and kind of devising what's the next steps. And then having him in very good agreement on what we want to see happen and the direction we would like to go and the steps we want to take to get there. And just having that kind of specialist backing what we want is really helpful. Knowing that we're kind of all on the same page on what's important and what we need to do first and that kind of thing. So really, really good. And just seeing God bringing all these specialists together. We have our transplant urologist, this new urologist, our GI doctor, all have been excellent and really wanting to bring the best care to Emmett possible. So couldn't ask for anything more than that for sure. And just really, really excited, I guess, in the next phase with new doctors. So we'll see where we go in this again next year, what this is going to look like, but should be a lot of new exciting things, maybe some harder things, but we'll get to them as we move along the journey. So He Promises this week is hearing God's voice, which I know can be difficult sometimes when things are busy, things are hectic. Sometimes it's hard to take that moment to sit and kind of be calm and just listen. I know Craig kind of touched on that about listening to the sounds and just sitting and being focused on listening. Certainly can be difficult, especially with busy lives and lots to do and things to get done. It can be difficult to take those moments. This should be pretty good. Talk it over. I think we should dive into some pretty good conversation here, and we'll see kind of where it all leads. Our scripture today comes from Luke 11:28. So this is Jesus replying, "Blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey it." So kind of a little bit of context. It's fine to hear it, but if you're not obeying what you're hearing, you're missing it. You can be super knowledged in the Bible and theology and all that, but if you don't listen or apply that, you're missing the whole thing that God's got for you. It's about doing what he's called you to do, not just hearing what he's telling you.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important, especially with hearing God's voice today. So our first question, if you could ask God one question, what would it be? I know that's a pretty open-ended question, but it's a pretty big question because
just one.
Yeah, I know. I can think of like 5 right now.
Yeah.
Like, well, these are things I'd like to ask, right? But yeah, it's pretty big question.
Well, I think for me, I often think back to, why parables? Why couldn't it be clearer? Like, what was it about us extrapolating and working with him? And at the same time, I kind of understand it because God didn't give us a recipe. He tried the laws. It didn't work. And so our new faith is based more on trust and a relationship with him. And it's not like a checklist. It's God wanting us to walk with him in the garden, which is where we get back. But yeah, it just couldn't have been a little bit clearer. Because sometimes I read the parables, I'm like, wow, like there's a lot in there that's not really clear.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's kind of like a friend of ours who does a recipe and you ask what her recipe is. And she says, I did it exactly, except for, right? I just feel parables have those except for
moments.
moments.
Yes. Ooh, that is a good one. That is a good question.
That is.
I think, clear. I like that one.
Yeah, because like in order to understand what Jesus said, some people didn't understand it. So kind of like why only some people and not everybody? But then also people had a choice of like, even if they did understand, that they didn't necessarily like what he was saying or agree with it.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I feel like I'm going between like, why aren't people healed? Especially like people who have taken lots of time to like pray for that person, maybe fast, like just really ask for God's intervention, and then it doesn't happen. And maybe it's an ongoing thing of like a chronic condition that you're praying for. Maybe it's just kind of all of a sudden and you want that person to be healed and they're not. And so, I guess that probably would be one of them. And just thinking like when Lazarus died and how Jesus wept. And a part of me is like, why do we have to go through those kind of weeping or mourning seasons? Because Jesus understood that those were really hard. When we love someone so much and we don't, especially when they pass away, right? And we don't get to be with them anymore, like just causes all sorts of devastation and loss. So yeah. But of course I also understand that there's reasons and that God uses those hard seasons and losses or no healing to grow us in different ways in that person struggling. So yeah.
I agree. It's hard to watch and know why, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think it'd be more similar to clarity, but I would say clarity to prayer. So not just we've had yeses, we've had nos, we've had waits, but maybe more explanation. Why can't we have more explanation on that answer? Just to, again, the clarification of why is it a yes, or why is it a no, or why is it a wait? Right. Just, I think it'd be like, why can't we have a bit more? Like just a little bit more clarification. For some, that might ease a bit of the anxiety or a little bit of that, workup of why is it a wait? What's going on? Why can't, like that kind of an idea? I have had those moments. And so I think, just why can't we have more clarification on the prayer, on like an answer to the prayer? Like what's that? I think
like a little emoji from God.
Yeah, like something more, just to help in that guidance of, yes, it's a wait, and this is why.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what? This makes me think of Emmett. All these why.
Whys.
And we've all asked why questions.
We all do ask why questions.
Because we all want clarity and understanding. And when we don't have it, it's like, what in the world?
Why can't I have that? Why can't I get this answer? Why can't, right? So
why don't you know what we're doing next?
What are we doing next? Why are we doing that? Why aren't we doing that? No. So just for me would be that clarity on the prayer, on the answers. Like, just a bit more clarity. Why can't we have some more? All right. Next question. I'm going to read Luke 11:28 again. So Jesus replied, "Blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey it." In what ways could obedience result in blessing? And what are some of the things that stop people from obeying the word of God?
Yeah, I think that act of following through on what you hearing God say, right? There's that growth piece on that act of doing it that just makes it more tangible, to be honest with you. Like head knowledge is like ideas and possibilities, but until you do something with it. And I think it's the same with our faith, that out of obedience is that act of seeing it through, doing something about it, is just so powerful. I think a lot of reasons why it's hard in those moments where, I had a situation this week where forgiveness can be hard, right? And I keep praying about it and I keep trying to work through it, and then having an opportunity to step into it. And I'm like, this is really hard. I don't want to be the first one. I don't want to be the one making the first move. And just reminding myself, like, it's okay. God's patient with me and it's a process. And sometimes it's not about looking right. I sometimes get caught up in that. Like, that's the proper thing to do, opposed to, well, God, is it? And asking those questions and just being waiting, right? Like sometimes I think there's that waiting piece. And sometimes I think the one that looks the prettiest is always the right answer, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes God's asking us to be okay with the mess and wait on him for a different timing. So it's a good reminder, but it's hard to be obedient when you're like, but I don't know how it's going to go. And I don't know what the reaction is going to be. And I don't know how I'm going to respond. And this might be harder for me. And
Yeah, that can be difficult. That's for sure.
Yeah. I guess for me, I think about just the fact that we get to be a part of something bigger than ourselves if we are willing to step out in faith and say yes to what God calls us to. And so I know we could all probably speak to, we pictured our lives kind of going one way. And then God was like, nope, I've got you on this path instead. And it's kind of been a whole roller coaster of things, right? Where we're constantly asked, are you going to trust me? Are you going to do this? And we can say yes or no along that path. And so, I think about like, I thought that I was going to be pursuing a different career with like fashion designing and whatnot. And then God kind of completely reoriented what kind of career I was going towards and what he had for me with serving people in marginalized and vulnerable situations and poverty. And so seeing how God kind of opened doors as I stepped into that and was obedient. And it ended up being so much better. Like the heart change that happened and the new perspective of like what actually matters in life. Like I still have a love for style and clothes and all of that, and that's not taken away from me, but that's not what God has called me to have like my main focus on. And so in terms of what stops people, what stopped me is just like, this doesn't make sense. And it's not easy. Like I'm a rather sensitive person. And so to learn about like injustices around the world would like break my heart and like completely like shake my world. And it would make me think like, God, why would you have this for this kind of life for someone who's really sensitive? And so just seeing like the compassion piece to that and it not being a weakness, but something that would move me to serve people. So it's been something that I wrestled with God for a very long time. And of course, there's so many other things that he's continuing to do, but it's just way better. Like we'll miss out if we don't to step out and be obedient. Because he has good plans, really good plans.
Yeah. The one that stands out to me for obedience, and it's probably the most simple one, is the tithe and just how the tithe works, right? So we're called to tithe that 10% back to God. Of course, the 100% is God. He allows us to use the 90 and the 10 goes back. But then seeing how being obedient in that 10% changes the mathematical God finance piece on how the 90% works viewed to the 100%, right? And so coming from a background of not understanding the tithe or that to understanding the tithe and seeing the blessings that come out of that by being obedient has just changed my understanding on being obedient in the areas of my life. Like, what does that mean when I'm called or I'm getting that push that this is the direction that I need to follow it, right? And it's just a constant reminder for me about seeing how God's provided in times of low finance, but being obedient even in the low finance, and seeing how everything still works its way through for that month, that season, and it's still all provided for, even though I'm running on less than, like, it's the God math that doesn't make sense, but that obedience of continuing to do it even when it is hard, I think, is part of it.
Yes.
Because it's easy to be, I can give the tithe when I'm plentiful, but when it's hard, are you still going to obey even when it is hard or even when it is tight? Can I still do that? And I think that ties into, stops people. I think people stop because they don't want to. I think it's a personal thought of, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And I know Craig touched on, if you don't want to hear the answer, don't ask God, right? Like, if you're not wanting the answer, then don't ask him that I'm here to serve, right? And I think some people get the answer and then they just ignore it because they're like, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do, right? And you could
Jonah.
Like Jonah, right? And you could have done the same. God was trying to push you on this path. You're like, I don't want to do that. I like fashion. I go this way, right?
Yeah.
And not go the direction he's calling you towards, and stop because that's not what you wanted to do. You wanted to do this, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that even though, like, thinking about Jonah, he was disobedient. I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm going to that group of people and that nation. And like, God still brought him around and still uses our mistakes and our disobedience to try and, like, we have many more opportunities to say yes, even if we didn't initially say yes, which I appreciate that, because we're all imperfect. We'll all make mistakes and think maybe this is, like, sometimes there's two really good opportunities or options, and it's like, I don't know which one's actually better.
Yeah.
So, and if you don't have that clarity of, like, yes, for sure, God said to go here, so you go here, and it's like, actually, God had you going this way. He can still bring you there ultimately.
But I think, but again, Craig illustrated that, he's talking about the guy, God called me to go run into this wall. Like,
oh gosh, yeah.
but that's having the accountable people around you that you can come to and ask and say, okay, I've got these two things. I think he's calling me this way, but then having the wise counsel of other people being able to pray about it and maybe bring in some guidance into those decisions when there is two very possible things to do, right? And again, some people, are going to look at those saying, well, this looks more fun. I'm just going to do that, right?
Yes.
And again, it all comes down to our own desires and not wanting to allow God what he wants, what we want, right? It's all about, we tend to hold on to it and say, we want the control. We want to manage it. We want to do it because it's our lives, right? That gets pumped into us that it's your life. You do what you want, right? And that's the culture. You do you, boo-boo. Yeah. It's all in the culture though, right? It's all in our culture. And so it's kind of backwards when you start thinking about, no, it's God's stuff, God's way, God's timing, God's, and having to let go of the control. And again, as you said, we're not perfect. It's not something we're going to be able to get rid of right away and just be like, it's all God and just totally, right? It's a process. One piece at a time, you start working towards giving more to God, one piece at a time. And as we get to one, the next one's a little easier. The next one's a little easier. And it just keeps, at least I find that way.
Well, I do too. I think reminding myself of the situations people have gone through. So when I feel overwhelmed, reminding myself like, okay, but God showed up here and here and here. And there's lots of things people are going through that are really hard. And just reminding myself of how God has shown up. Yep. Today in Loop, we talked about God's upside down kingdom.
Yep.
Yes.
And, just wrapping our heads around that. I think obedience is also like no, like, God, we're here to conquer. No, we're here to serve. We're here to be the best. No, you're here to be, whoever's the first is the last, right? And it's just a very upside down way of thinking about what our world says is greatness is actually not. It's having that resolve in the things of servants and putting yourself second and God and others first, and being willing to serve in a way that people don't want to. And you just realize that the people who have impacted me the most are the people who have a servant's heart, who know their calling, are being used by God, but are just genuine in who they are. And they're not chasing after all of this other stuff that just doesn't lead to. But you're right. Like with money, we think we're going to do it. And God's saying, no, I'm your provider. Trust me with it. It's not up to you. And sometimes God says, give it away. Right?
Oh, yes.
No, that's not to say just, I'm just going to give it away and God's going to provide. Like there's a...
No, but there's moments where...
It's like you need to give away, right?
I remember my first car, Dave and I were just talking about this, that I was able to get my first car because of my grandparents' willingness to sacrifice and set up an education fund that I didn't need for university. So I was able to get my first car to get to placements. I was able to then get a job. And so I gave my first car away. I didn't trade it in, and went to another family. And now we're in this situation where someone's come to us now saying, hey, we're upgrading. Do you want our car? And I, as I wrestle with that, like, no, we should be paying them. It's like, God's just saying, no, this is my kingdom, and let people do what they feel they're called to do and stop managing it.
Yeah. And that's part, and again, that could be part of missing some of the blessing, right? Because we tend to step in and try to manage it, right?
Yeah, which was like Jesus, right? Like he could have chosen to just scrap the crucifixion because that was the hardest thing to do. And here he is, he's like, take this cup away from me, but not my will, let your will be done. And exactly what both of you have said, what stood out is just like, we are not the protagonist of our stories. At the end of the day, like, we are instruments and God will use us, but like he is the main, he is the protagonist of our lives, and everything should be pointing back to him and what he did through us. And so it's really cool to do that, because then it reminds us to not be selfish and to be humble and to be constantly in surrender to him, and not in a way that's like, I don't know, like not being forced, but like it's an invitation that God calls us to be a part of the work that he has. And of course it involves like our full commitment. God doesn't want us to be lukewarm and just half-hearted in things, but just all in and just like all committed my whole life. Like what Craig ends off, right, with the whole like giving your life to Christ is like your everything. My life is not my own. And we give it to God and just see how he uses that. It's just so much better.
Yeah, it's a very different transformation, and seeing those blessings and seeing the obedience, I think, does help to be more obedient in other areas. When you start to see blessings and things come in, I think it makes it a little easier then to understand, okay, no, God is in this. He is a part of this. He is calling this. I do this and he provides, right? So, it's very different. It's a very different way to live. It's a very different way to be in a culture that's the opposite to that. But then recognizing that culture doesn't really matter in the bigger picture, right? It doesn't really matter. It's more about what God's wanting you to do, and being open to that. You can be closed off and say no, but being open to that and aware of God's around me, God's guiding me, and listening and taking those times just to sit and reflect, I think is very important to hear from God, which then can help you in your next step. In your direction. Oh man, time flies. As we start at the beginning, time flies as you as you start to have birthdays, and then you're like, wow, where did the first, whatever years disappear? And next thing you know, you're looking back and it's crazy, and you have a 9-year-old son. That's just wow.
Yeah.
Where did that time fly, right?
I know.
So it was funny. We were discussing about baptisms as they had them the other week, and like I was like, wow, it'll be going on 11 years since I was baptized, which is just crazy. It's crazy that amount of time's gone by. Thinking back and what that looked like, it was just, again, time flies. So anyway, so I want to thank you guys for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed this week. I encourage you guys to check out this, He Promises series. If you haven't got the first couple, go back, rewatch them. They are excellent. And again, you can jump into these talk it over questions for each of them. You two friends, of course, can start your own life group and just be a part of what's going on and dive deeper into the questions and really dive into what God does have for you as you move on in this journey. And of course, we want to thank the tech team behind us, of course, making this all possible. I want to thank you two for joining me again. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. And of course, we want to remember, whoever finds God
Finds life.